In this video, I will be explaining how to create standard solutions and equilibrium solutions and how to find the absorbances and concentrations of these. So assuming that your burettes are already cleaned and filled with iron nitrate and thiocyanate at your lab bench, you will now only need to remove the air bubbles. So the way that we remove the air bubbles is by taking a waste beaker and putting it under your burette. Let the solution flow out into the waste beaker until the air bubbles have been removed. Also, make sure that your solution in the burette is sitting at a whole number. While you're doing this, make sure that you are wearing your eyeglasses in order to not allow the solutions to get into your eyes. So for part one, we will be using a 50 milliliter volumetric flask, and we will be filling it with the various milliliters of the other solutions. So first, take the 50 milliliter volumetric flask and fill it with 5 milliliters of 0.200 molar iron nitrate. Once you've done this, you will now take 2 milliliters of a 0.00200 molar of thiocyanate and fill it in the same volumetric flask. Once you have done this and filled it with both of the solutions, you will now fill the rest of the volumetric flask with distilled water. Fill it all the way up until the line, and once you've done this, make sure you use parafilm to invert it at least 3 times to make sure that the solution is all mixed. Once you've done this and finished creating the first standard solution, pour this into a beaker and label it standard solution 1 and make sure you keep it for later. So once you've done this, repeat these same steps for the rest of the 3 solutions, and make sure that you change the varying amounts of thiocyanate as you put them into the volumetric flask. So next, we will have to create a blank so that we can calibrate the spectrometer. So the blank that we'll be using will be 50 milliliters of the 0.200 molar iron nitrate and 0 milliliters of the 0.00200 molar thiocyanate. So once you've done this, pour this into a volumetric flask and put it in and pour that into a beaker and keep it for later so we can calibrate the spectrometer. So once you've created all the standard solutions and the blank solution, you will now use the spectrometer to obtain the absorbances of these. So plug the spectrometer into the computer and open up Logger Pro. To calibrate the spectrometer, we will now use the blank solution. So to calibrate it, you will put the blank solution into the cuvette and fill it 2/3 full. Make sure to put the smooth side on the light so that the spectrometer will be able to work properly. Before you put the cuvette into the spectrometer, make sure to wipe it with a Kim wipe in order to not damage the spectrometer. So once you've calibrated the spectrometer, you will now start with standard solution 1. So rinse the same cuvette with the first standard solution and then fill the same with 2/3 full of the first solution. And make sure when we are putting the solutions into the cuvette that we are using a pipette in order to make sure the solutions don't get all over your lab bench. So once you put it into the spectrometer, you will now use Logger Pro to find the lambda max of the standard solutions, and you will record this in your table. Once you have done this, you will continue the same process for the rest of the solutions to find the absorbances, and make sure when you do this that you rinse with the next solution. Once you have found all the absorbances of all of the solutions, you will then open Excel to create a standard curve. You will use absorbance on the y-axis and concentration on the x. So once you have created the standard curve, you will now find the equation of the line and you can calculate for the concentration. So now we're on to part 2. So part 2, we will be creating equilibrium solutions. So you can use the same burette from part 1 for thiocyanate. However, this is a different molar for the iron nitrate. So now you'll need to collect a new burette and fill it with 0.00200 molar of the iron nitrate. Make sure that you have cleaned it by pouring some into the burette and allowing it to flow through. Once you've done this, you can fill the burette with the rest of the solution and start making your solutions. So for this one, we will be using a 10 milliliter volumetric flask, and for the first solution, we will be filling it with 4 milliliters of the 0.00200 molar iron nitrate and 2 milliliters of the 0.00200 molar thiocyanate. Once you have done this and filled both of the solutions into the volumetric flask, you will then fill to the line using distilled water. Again, we will need to use parafilm in order to invert the solutions to make sure that is all mixed. Once you have done this, pour the solution into a test tube and label the test tube A. Repeat these same steps for the rest of the solutions, and make sure to also account for the varying milliliters. So next, as the same thing in part 1, we will be using the spectrometer to get these absorbances. So we will be using distilled water as the blank this time instead of the iron nitrate. So you will now fill the cuvette 2/3 full of distilled water, and you will calibrate it into the spectrometer. Again, making sure that you wipe it with a Kim wipe and make sure that the smooth side is facing the light. Once you have done this and calibrate the spectrometer, you will then rinse with the first solution like we did in part 1. Once you've done this, you will find the lambda max of this solution and fill it into your table. Repeat the same steps for finding the lambda max for the rest of the solutions, and again, make sure that you rinse with the next solution that you're going to use. Once you've recorded these on your sheet, you can finally calculate the concentrations of all of these solutions, and you can then clean your lab bench and make sure that all the equipment is clean and your lab bench is also clean. And make sure you put all your materials away, and then you're finally done.